Yes, but when you have written, and you have extensively, about the need to modernise the Egyptian education system, you've said that at the moment the system doesn't encourage students to question, to think critically, and you've pushed for a complete change in the way education is run in the country. That is a massive sort of long-term institutional change. But this conversation is conducted in the spirit of what's going to happen in the next few months.
Absolutely.
I mean, shouldn't that be where your focus right now? Because the stability of the nation is at stake.
I could focus on the two of them, and I could focus also on things that might abort this to happen at any time. If I end up with a Minister of Education like the Minister of Education in Gaza today, I will never have a chance to talk about modern education.
But here's a question for you, bringing it back to this notion of the street and what the mass of the Egyptian public wants. If you are right, and Egyptians do not want an Islamicized government, why is it that at the moment populist politicians who are seeking to win support appear to be pushing an agenda which is very much an Islamic agenda? For example, right now there's a huge fuss in Egypt over the teachings at Cairo University's English department, because one of the set texts includes a lesbian scene. It's a book written by an American author, yes. And Islamic groups are trying to get that banned, and the press is running with this story. The impression I get is that the public, readers of newspapers, appear to be outraged by what the university is doing.
Politicians, and I'm not one of them, yeah, I'm a writer, yeah, politicians try to have some common ground with the Islamists, because if you are in 100% hostility with them, you would lose some votes, or maybe many votes. I don't come from this angle. I come from the angle of somebody who thinks of the history of his country, the future of his country, what is the best, and I try to write this. I believe that the best thing the West ever did was to tell to the clergy, we respect you, you are great inside the church or the synagogue, but you have no right to say whether Galileo was the right man or not, whether Copernicus was sane or insane. You don't run the society. You have no say on Darwin. Once we have them in, do you know that Saudi Arabia doesn't teach philosophy? It is the only country on the face of earth that does not have this subject. There is nobody that ever studied inside Saudi Arabia philosophy. Why? Because you know why. Because philosophy takes you to questions. Also, imagine that it's the only country that you can study biology without reading the name Charles Darwin.
Yes, well, Saudi Arabia obviously is a model which not even the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt says it's actually going to follow. But, yeah. But let's get back to what's practical in Egypt. I mean, if the liberals, of whom you are a powerful spokesman, if the liberals were serious about pushing their agenda, why is it, for example, that the reforming Prime Minister in the current government has failed to provide women with any prominent posts in his government at all?
It's a great mistake. I wrote about it. I wrote in Ahram that the committee that worked out the constitutional amendment did not have one single woman.
But this Prime Minister is supposed to be on your side.
My side is very large. You know that the largest front on earth is the Liberal Front. It has, actually, it has everybody.
My point is that you're not in active politics, but those liberals who are in active politics appear to believe that the public of Egypt won't wear their more, if I can say it this way, extreme, liberal, secular ideas and practices. The Egyptian public, they believe, isn't ready for that.
I think that, talking about this Prime Minister and this particular point, I totally disagree with. I think he should have given a good example, but it is not the end of the world. Yeah, if somebody makes a mistake like this, we lived with mistakes for 30 years, yeah? And with Islamists, Gaza has been living for 5 years. We all are green and new with democracy. All what I'm trying to say and to do is to say, don't let us have a system that will abort any chance of progress.
Here's what one liberal activist, Shadi Ghazali Khab, said recently. He's forming his own party. He said,
a great young man.
Yeah,
yes.
But, well, you know, you keep praising these liberals, but these liberals themselves see that there's a fundamental problem on your side of the political fence, because he says, quote, the liberals have failed to form a true ideological party that knows the street language of the people.
To a certain extent, not to a full extent, but there are people who
do you speak the street language of the people?
No, I personally do not, but I tell you one thing. There is a very good liberal party formed by Naguib Sawiris that He tried very hard. He went to the 28 provinces of Egypt, and he took all the other liberal parties with him, the ones who didn't accept to join his party, and he spoke to people in Upper Egypt, and we are all new players, including the Islamists, and I believe that there is nothing wrong in having them on the stage, because they will not remain as one body. I always said that I want him on the stage. Once we have them in the stage, we have right, left, and middle, as in any human society. There is nothing that could keep them united except oppression. And they have been oppressed. And I wrote against the oppression that they were subjected to. But I believe that the liberal parties will do well in the next elections. Everybody says in the next elections the Muslim Brothers will have 50%. I assure you, they will not have one above 30%. They will have way below. You may have the right to tell me based on what. I tell you, in the elections at the university a few weeks ago, they got 23%. In the student unions.
But one huge factor in who will win out is surely going to be the economy. We haven't talked about it, but in brief, it seems to me that people like you, with your long business experience and a liberal outlook which encourages open, free trade, deregulation, you're offering the Egyptian people a vision of economic reform which is little more than sort of shock therapy, massive reductions in subsidies, reduction of public sector wages. Is that going to be popular?
No, and it doesn't have to happen this way. I was asked once by Gamal Mubarak, do you really support subsidizing education? I said yes. And then he said, and food? I said yes. And he said, how could you be a liberal when you say this? I said, I mean, a liberal, there is no model for liberals, number one. Number two, Egyptians live today in accordance with a social contract that was formulated by Gamal Abdel Nasser. Abdel Nasser, as if he said to you, you are an Egyptian, I'll give you a job, I guarantee a job for you. A very lousy salary, but I finance the education of your children and I find jobs for them. This was his social contract, which has happened in Algeria, Libya, all the countries that imitated Egypt. I say
The problem, of course, is that you've got a budget deficit in Egypt that's spiralling out of control, close to 10% of GDP.
Very serious.
Everything about your economy is extraordinarily weak right now.
It's very gloomy. I understand, but now I say, if you have a widow who is taking a pension of 200 sterling and you ask her to pay 2,000 sterling rent for the flat because we fixed the rents, she has the full right to say to you, no, let us review the package. We need real jobs, real salaries, and then you remove gradually the subsidies. There is no capitalism as per Adam Smith anymore on earth. And I don't believe in this, and I believe in social fairness, and I believe that you can't slaughter the Egyptians by saying, tomorrow, no subsidy of food.
Well, which is why Egypt has a huge problem with the IMF and the World Bank right now, because they want to tie future loans to
subsidy removal
and slashing of government expenditure. Yeah. But before we end, and we must end soon, I actually want to move on to another area where it seems to me there's a question about how in tune with the people of your country you are. You've always described yourself as an admirer of Sadat, and you believe that Sadat did the right thing in pushing the peace with Israel, and that you believe Egypt made a mistake by turning that into a cold peace, not a warmer peace.
Absolutely.
Do you think right now that reflects the feeling of the Egyptian people?
No, because the lawyer of the case was very incompetent. I mean the Mubarak regime. The lawyer of the case, I mean in any case, even if it's a fair case, you need a competent lawyer.
The current government, the government that you are prepared to put your faith in for the time being at least, they have ministers have called Israel the enemy. They've talked about a new, better relationship with Iran. They've certainly warmed up relations with Hamas and opened the border across Rafah into Gaza. They've taken a series of decisions which have upset Israel, upset the United States, but which appear, for the moment at least, to be supported by the Egyptian people.
Because I'm independent, I can say the following. These people are singing to the masses. Egypt doesn't have a leadership today. Egypt needs to reach the level of having leadership. Once you have a leadership, it is either to go war or peace. I would be advocating that we have to go peace because we cannot afford otherwise, and there is no reason otherwise. Actually, there is no reason. We have recovered our Sinai. We all, by the way, even the hawks of the Arab world do not endorse a war with Israel. Nobody can endorse a war between non-nuclear against a nuclear power.
It's not so much about a war with Israel, it's about asserting Egypt's regional power. That's what
there was no leadership to tell people that we better go and focus on our domestic affairs. I try to advocate this. We had enough occupancy and We have been preoccupied with external matters for long. I would love to see a prime minister and a president who say to Egyptians, for 2 decades we will focus on domestic affairs, creating jobs, improving education, women's rights, so forth.
Well, that's what you'd like to hear. I wonder whether you will. And I wonder what you make of this. Fareed Zahran, a member of the Social Democratic Party, another liberal party in Egypt, says, if Egypt builds a modern secular state, that will colour the whole region. But if it goes into a dark tunnel, Egypt will take the whole region with it. Which way is it going to go, do you believe?
I'm very optimistic that we will not go into the dark tunnel. I agree with the first part of the statement. Whatever Egypt does, it usually will have a tremendous impact on the region. There is a good chance, I don't guarantee anything for you, there is a good chance that we do well. And we have to work hard on it. And let me add one thing. Well, there is no tomorrow. Tomorrow is what we make.
That's a good way to end. Tarek Heggy, thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.
Thank you, sir.